It's Trail Days 2018 in Damascus, Virginia. I was at Trail Days earlier this afternoon, and I just left Elk Garden trailhead on the AT for a 4-night backpacking trip in the Mount Rogers high country. I've been coming to Trail Days for 15 plus years, mostly as an excuse to backpack in the Mount Rogers high country. I'm not sure how far I'm going to go in this evening, maybe just to Deep Gap or somewhere around Deep Gap. Deep Gap is closed to camping and has been for the 15 plus years I've been coming here so that it can heal. Deep Gap has fully healed, and I'm not sure why they don't open it back up to camping. But anyway, it was raining earlier today. It's partly cloudy now, and the temperature is about 70 degrees. This is Deep Gap. It looks like to me it's pretty well healed. We have a few people up here that have chosen to ignore the sign and camp at Deep Gap. Alright, I left Deep Gap and took the little spur trail down to the spring. It's about a half a mile down to the spring. Filled up with 4 liters of water and started heading back up to Deep Gap. And I saw what looked like a flat spot, so I bushwhacked off trail and found what is actually an old campsite. As soon as I got here, it started raining, so I had to scramble around and get my tarp set up. This is when the tarp actually excels. It's raining, I've got plenty of protection. I don't have to squeeze in some small little tent. I can still see out. But anyway, it rained pretty hard for a while. It's letting up a little bit now. I've still got to filter water and hang up my bear bag, so it looks like it's going to be a wet night. Day 2, and I'm back on the AT, headed north toward Thomas Nobb's shelter. The weather last night was fog and rain all night with a heavy fog this morning, but it's blue skies now, and the temperature is about 70 degrees again. Last night I mentioned that the spring was a half a mile. There was a sign at Deep Gap. Somebody had scratched in the distance to the spring, and I misread it last night, and I checked it this morning. It's actually 3/10 of a mile. The plan for today is to continue on the AT north to Rhododendron Gap, then hop on the Pine Mountain Trail, and then camp somewhere tonight at one of several campsites between the Pine Mountain Trail and the Crest Trail. I hopped off the AT and took a short spur trail about 200 feet over to Briar Ridge. There's the first ponies of the trip in the distance, and in the far distance is White Top Mountain. Well, the longhorn steers were hanging out at the campsite that I was thinking about, so I backtracked a little bit on the Crest Trail, and I'm taking a little spur trail to a campsite and a spring that I know of, but I've never camped here before. Also, the gnats were pretty bad there, so maybe they'll be a little bit better in the woods. All right, I believe this campsite will work. It doesn't have the view the other campsite had, but the water is much closer. In fact, the creek is about 200 feet over there, and I can hear it flowing. Also, there's no longhorn steers at this campsite. Well, it looks like I spoke too soon about the longhorn steers. I've got 3 of them here running around, and looks like they're contemplating getting closer. I ran into a rancher up here a few years ago that owns them, and he says that there really is nothing to worry about, that they think you're going to feed them. I'm not really concerned about them attacking or anything, but I've had them get really close to my tarp several times, and I'm always concerned they'll just unintentionally rip my tarp with one of those horns. So anyway, hopefully I don't have to chase them off, and right now they're about 200 feet away from my tarp, so hopefully they'll keep their distance. Today's been an interesting day so far. This morning about 6:30, the cows came into my camp and woke me up. There must have been about 15 of them. One of them was about 20 feet from my tarp, just standing there staring at me. Had a nice little breakfast, the weather was great, and then all of a sudden the dark clouds rolled in, a lot of thunder, rain, heavy for about an hour. So I waited that out, packed up under my tarp, and now I'm on the Crest Trail headed to Scales. I'm not sure what the plan is today. Initially, I was going to take the trail up over Stone Mountain and then drop into Little Creek Wilderness. But with all the rain and the thunder, I think I may just take the Scales Trail toward Wise Shelter and camp somewhere along Wilson Creek. Oh, and by the way, I finally had to chase the cows out of my camp last night. I just kind of charged at them with my hands above my head, yelling and screaming like a lunatic. That kind of freaked them out, and they must have thought I was crazy, and they left after that. When I got to Scales, the weather had cleared up a little bit, so I decided to go with the original plan and take the AT up over Stone Mountain. I'm at the top of Stone Mountain now. I've got a little ways to go, then I'll take the Bearpin Trail and drop down into Little Wilson Creek Wilderness. Well, if this great little campsite had been on the other side of the creek, I would have avoided that knee-deep crossing of Little Wilson Creek, which is not so little today. Tonight will be my third night to camp at this campsite. My first time was in, I think it was 1998 or maybe 1999 on a winter backpacking trip in Mount Rogers. Coldest backpacking trip I've ever been on. We left Elk Garden at noon on that trip, and the high was 21 degrees. We camped here on our second night. It was about 25 degrees. The wind was just ferocious, and somebody had shot a deer, skinned it, and hung it in a tree back over here. So no deer on this trip. Day 4, and I'm backtracking back up to the AT on the Cabal Trail, the Big Wilson Creek Trail, and then the Bear Pen Trail. After I hit the AT, I'm going to go south and then connect with the Virginia Highlands Horse Trail and go over to Cabin Ridge, where I'm going to stay tonight. Last night was the coldest night so far. The temperature was 48 degrees. Today it's mostly cloudy, about 70 degrees again, with a few little light sprinkles. Well, a change of plans. I'm about a half a mile from the campsite on Cabin Ridge that I intended to stay at, but the clouds are looking pretty dark. It's sprinkling a little bit, so I'm going to camp in this little campsite. I've stayed here a couple times, but it's been years ago. Cabin Creek is about 150 feet down the trail. This will give me an opportunity to get my tarp set up before any storms roll in, and I'd rather be in this little drainage than on top of that ridge if we have any serious storms. Day 5, my final day, and I'm continuing on the Virginia Highlands Horse Trail up to Cabin Ridge, where I'll cross a large meadow and then continue on the Virginia Highlands Horse Trail back to the Elk Garden trailhead. No storms last night, just light rain, just enough to keep me under the tarp. But today it's mostly cloudy, and I'm hoping for dry weather. This is Mount Rogers, and as we pan to the left, that green grassy gap is Briar Ridge, and in the far distance is White Top Mountain. Almost back to Elk Garden, and this has been a fun, beautiful trip, even with the rain. While I was on the AT, of course, I saw many backpackers, but on the trails other than the AT, I only saw 3 people. Today I saw a guy on a horseback on Cabin Ridge, and then on the 3rd day, the rain day, I ran into a couple on the Crest Trail. They were wanting to be on the AT. They had spent the night at Thomas Knob's shelter. They got turned around at Rhododendron Gap, got on the Pine Mountain Trail, and then the Crest Trail, and were trying to find their way back to Massey Gap. They had a little paper map that I guess the Grayson Highlands State Park gave to them. It was soaking wet and in about 3 pieces. So I pulled out my map and showed them how to get back to Massey Gap. It's really kind of funny. They were more interested in telling me their story than listening to directions about how to get back to Massey Gap. Anyway, just another beautiful, fantastic trip in the Mount Rogers area. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.